Welcome to the April Social Work Services Committee. I'll take this opportunity now to remind you everyone that the meeting will be recorded and the recording will subsequently be available for public listening. Okay. Item 1, the Sederunt apologies. Have we any apologies?
Chairman, apologies from Councillor Syme. I haven't heard from Councillor Scobie. I'm not sure if he's an apology or not. 17 members in at the start of the meeting.
Thank you. Declaration of interest. Leader.
Chair, it's under item 6. It's a strategic paper with regard to how it's going forward. I'm a non-executive director of the NHS. I wouldn't be planning to leave the meeting for that, as there's no financial implications.
Thank you. I'd also like to declare an interest as well. I'm on the NHS Public Health Committee representing the Council, but like the leader, no financial implications, so I'd be staying for that item on the agenda. Okay, any other? Thanks very much. There will be no item 3, just excuse me, is it a declaration of interest?
I don't know that I should, Chair, but you know, I'm in the Community Health and Social Care Partnership Board. We've already dealt with this item. I'm sure it's not relevant, but I just have to make you aware that I'm on that particular board.
Same for Councillor McKee and Councillor Maitland as well, and Councillor Tuckfield. So I think that's a given. We couldn't operate with the declaring interest every time, John. Right. Item 3, which is in the written agenda, will not be taken because in actual fact that was agreed at full council. So therefore it's there in error. Okay, so we'll move on to item 4, which is redesigning the community justice system consultation report of the director. And Mr. Montefort, I think you're taking us through this. Is there anything, Alan, you'd like to add to your report, or take it forward as you wish?
Chair, just before we start, if you don't mind.
Yes, Joe.
We've spoken about these papers before. There's other committees get the papers, and the actual item number is in the top right-hand corner of the pages. Social work, for some reason, is getting misstated. There might be other committees getting misstated here, I don't know. But there are committees where it does happen, and there are committees where it doesn't happen. It's much easier to follow what pages you need to be on if that item number is in the top corner.
That's not a joke, and you're absolutely right. So we'll take that through the admin to make sure it doesn't happen in the future. Yeah. Okay, so we're ready to move on. Councillor Wood.
Actually, on the very same point, though, we must commend them for getting the wonderful colour throughout the pages.
Right, okay. Thank you, Andrew. Okay, can we go on with the business, please? So patting ourselves in the back. Right, Alan, we're over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things. As indicated in the report, I would give a verbal update in terms of both the COSLA position as it stands and the South West Scotland CJA position. COSLA are due to meet and discuss a paper this coming week, this Friday, with the main proposals, as I understand it, reinforcing the already declared position that the preferred option from the three, of which are, just to remind folk, are the option A, the enhanced CJA, option B, the local model, and option C, which is the creation of a national service. COSLA are in favour of a continuing model where services are delivered locally but also planned locally, and continue to promote that. There's been ongoing discussion between COSLA, ADSW, the Association of Directors of Social Work, and the Community Justice Authority chief officers and staff, and in terms of putting forward the proposal. So that remains. In terms of the CJA itself, and as I understand it, 7 of the 8 community justice authorities have supported a more localised model, with 1 undeclared. I can't give the information that prefers a national model. The basis of the CJA proposals is to build on the good work that's happened and been in effect already. That includes cross-boundary working where it's practical and possible, and ensuring that the national lead is provided through Scottish Government and associated agencies and authorities, including the Risk Management Authority, the Scottish Social Services Council and the Care Inspectorate. but the proposal would be to create a community planning-based model that would focus on reducing offending within localities. The suggestion is that that might be pan-authority, so that the three Ayrshires, for example, would continue to work together, but recognises the changes in the police structures may create a situation where to build the reducing offending partnerships around the police divisions might be helpful, which in effect, if that was accepted, would see Dumfries and Galloway being a partnership within the boundaries of the local authority, but continuing to undertake work, as I said, with the agencies outside and continuing our joint work with the three Ayrshire authorities, as we have done, but also in terms of some of the national bodies we've worked with. So those are the updates I promised, both in terms of the causeless position and the CGA.
Thanks, Alan. So the causeless position is sort of like a B+, for example. Is that what you're saying? What exactly are the additions?
It hasn't been agreed yet, so what I understand has been proposed is similar to come out of the consultation event last week, when a number of practitioners and other interested parties were there, which was a model that said that it was a local authority, but it required some tweaks. So, for example, what came out last week was suggesting that rather than the Risk Management Authority assuming the role and responsibility for managing performance and oversight of performance, that we look to build on the working relationship with the Care Inspectorate and others, rather than transferring responsibilities, and to ensure that we did have the shared services and we continue to work on the joint training agenda, and we recognised that there was a clear need, as there is in all parts of social work services, indeed I would suggest all local authority services, to have some national steer and national set of principles we have to work to. And already within criminal justice social work, there's a document, a national policy document called National Outcomes and Standards that sets the standards for practice. So it's building those themes, so a recognition that there are already things in place that need to be continued, but some adjustments would have to be made to the proposals in order to make them as effective as possible.
Thank you. Questions? Leader?
So from what you're saying with the change, there'll be national direction delivered by local delivery models, and we'll still keep sort of partnership working with our neighbours, East Ayrshire, South Ayrshire and North Ayrshire. So if there's something there that we can actually buy into just now, it's still there after the new model comes in. And with relation to that, does that mean to say where it says in the recommendations that option B is the preferred causal one, it's actually option B plus these tweaks?
Essentially, yes, it's the option B plus the tweaks, and that's been developed within some of the things in terms of what I said in the previous report and in this report. There are some key principles that have to be adhered to, and those national guidance would still stand. So national standards for practice would still continue, but we'd be looking particularly in terms of our relationship and working relationship between justice services and non-justice services, that would be developed through the community planning process rather than through some external body.
Joe?
I entirely agree with what you're saying. I don't think we should, albeit we have our control in the area, and I think that's the right way forward. But I don't think we should ever go away from consultation with other groups, other areas. We can all learn from one another, and I think the day of recognising that other people have knowledge as well has been recognised for quite some time. It very much was at a time where he never spoke to anybody else and never sought advice, and I think if we go back to that, we're going in the reverse and would make the service worse. I think we're doing a good job. What's proposed in here is the right way forward, I think, and that it's operated locally and under national guidance, if you like. But the national guidance has only been to be a light touch and advice, not to come in and try and tell you how to run the business or what's required in your own area.
Yes. On Tuesday this week, I was actually at the CGA meeting in Irvine with the four representatives on that authority. and they were finalising their proposals, and Alan has reflected extremely accurately the view of that authority. So, well, I kind of think I don't think we can actually say we'll do option B. We need to say option B with any. It's the COSLA recommendations or the finalisation, and it falls in line as well. I think Alan will keep me right here. It falls in line with what the three Ayrshire's and Dumfries and Galloway's vision is of the future service. And is there anything I'm missing out here, Alan? I don't think I am.
No, I think you're reflecting the position. I mean, yes, it's difficult to give full detail of what the pluses would be, but it would be based on those particular themes of continue to work to national outcomes and standards, to ensure that we cooperate with the appropriate national organisations, including the Risk Management Authority, Scottish Social Services Council, the Care Inspectorate, and the universities who are involved in research, that we continue to develop the national training model, and that we work with that. There's also some suggestion that there's need for discussion between local authorities and Scottish Government at a national level, but that's to be sorted. And beyond that, so those would be the principles in terms of that joint working. Beyond that, recognising that we have done some effective work, as Councillor McKay has said, in terms of our work with our colleagues in Ayrshire and beyond. The plan would still be, no matter the model, to continue the joint programme delivery team, for example, where we deliver specific programmes for particular offenders, and to work together in terms of joint training, etc. And that's been, the joint training agenda has been there for some time, even before the CGAs were created. I was the representative working with 10 other local authorities in developing training for criminal justice services some time ago. So it's building on those, but very much building on the need to develop the local working relationships through the community planning process in terms of how the justice services engage with non-justice services that have a key role to play, and amongst those in particular would be our colleagues in housing and health, and within health, mental health and addictions being some of those prevalent ones that we have to address.
Okay, Dennis.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, I see no option, either option B, and I wonder if we could agree option B today, but then come back at a future meeting when we know exactly what COSLA's proposing as add-ons, because like yourself, and in my past life, having gone to CGA meetings, there was some good work done, but for me the political side was always clumsy, because they were always fighting to try and get a quorum. I think the director will remember we had a day here where we were at the local prison, and halfway through that prison visit, 2 members couldn't make it, so we weren't quorate. And that type of thing kept on sort of happening. And in the end, in those days, we had 3 members that went up. So I would see that far better that it is locally controlled. But I hear what's saying, but I would have thought we could agree B today and then have a recommendation that we further consider the add-ons from COSLA as soon as they're ready.
I think you're right. I'm not getting a view here. Anyone's got a different view on this. I'm just a bit wary here that we need to not reflect what's in the paper, because that view has slightly changed, my understanding will be from COSLA. So whether we agree to the option, whatever the COSLA option is the agreed position for us to take forward to the strategic partnership for inclusion in the Dumfries and Galloway response to this. Are we all happy with that, Leader?
My understanding from Mr Monteforte was that COSLA is going to have a final decision. What happens if that final decision on Friday is different from what we feel is the best one? I know I would be taking the recommendation from this committee forward to put my point to COSLA on if it's Friday, but if they somehow suddenly decided that A was better than B, I think we should still mention option B, whether it's under option B, with a caveat that we see there's bolt-ons that should be there. But I think we should say that that is our preferred position. I think there's unanimity around the table that option B is the way forward, and that's what we would be putting in our community planning partnership response as well, or putting that to the community planning partnership, and I think it'd be up to them to decide whether they're willing to back council's view on that.
Fine. Jock, you want it in?
Aye, thanks, Chair. I think what Alan was just saying there about joint working locally, with the likes of housing services and these sort of people will not be involved at the present level. When you go into the likes of here for your meetings and what, Community Justice Authority, the local housing partnerships will not be involved to the extent that we can get them involved when we're doing things locally. And I'd be very concerned at us accepting what COSLA is going to say, as the leader says. COSLA might come out with a totally different perspective to us. And I think we need to hold the line that we want to deliver a service. We can improve the service delivery by involving other bodies at this level that are not involved at the level where the community justice is at the present moment. Just a question I'd like to ask. You're talking about D&G strategic partnership. Can you tell me where that is, please? Because I'm concerned that we're here as elected members making a decision on these proposals, and yet some other group's going to decide whether they agree with us or not. Can you tell me where they are, please?
Yeah, I'm going to pass the buck very nicely to the leader because he chairs that strategic partnership. Ivor, can you just explain to members exactly who's all in the partnership?
The strategic partnership is the new name for the community planning partnership, which has health, police, private sector, third sector and council representation on it.
And they're all elected. And they were nominated, went through full council. Council representation is the leader, myself, Mrs Tuckfield, Mrs Maitland, and Finlay Carson. Yeah. And Brian Collins.
Is that group in a position to overturn any decision we make here today?
Leader?
My view would be they might tweak things from the partners who aren't round the table today, but my view would be that I would be promoting what the council puts forward as the best way forward. It's like going to COSLA, I can put forward the council's view there, but if I get voted down at COSLA, I get voted down at COSLA.
Absolutely, and that's the process as is, and it has been agreed. It was the process last administration and the administration before that, I believe. So it's a tried and tested thing. We are where we are with it. It's only a consultation. They're not making decisions. It's the response to consultation.
So whatever decision we take today will be the council decision that will go forward.
What we take today will go forward to the joint, the strategic partnership through the leader, myself, Mrs Tuckfield, Mrs Maitland, and the other representatives who are not in this committee to make sure that the view of this committee is heard and understood. Yeah.
But the view of this committee will stop at the strategic partnership. If the strategic partnership doesn't agree with our decision today, our decision will go no further. My point of view is that, or what I'm suggesting is that we are the elected members, we are making the decision today, and the decision that we make should be the decision that goes forward for discussion at COSLA or wherever, but certainly no for any other group. A strategic partnership can make up their own mind, but that shouldn't be, our decision shouldn't be altered to suit the strategic partnership, if you like.
For clarification, Chair.
No, just a second, Jim. There's
I'm looking for clarification after you, aye.
I'm not in a position to second guess what decisions might or might not be taken in other places, particularly around the table at the strategic partnership, but the option would still be available to this council to submit its own views in relation to the consultation by the 30th of April, which may or may not accord with the position taken by the strategic partnership. It may obviously raise questions about the effectiveness of joint working locally if there was a mismatch between the two, but if the concern is that the council's view might not prevail and might be stopped somewhere within Dumfries and Galloway, I think I can reassure members that that needn't be the case, that a separate submission could go forward. And indeed, the Scottish Government's made it clear that they're inviting as many submissions from different interested parties as they want, because the Cabinet Secretary has made it very clear he wants to reflect on the whole range of views. So the Council could make its own submission, regardless of whatever came out of the strategic partnership discussion. Of course, it would maybe not be desirable, but that would be an option that would be open to.
That's answered my question. As long as we make a decision and it carries forward, it's no altered by some smaller group, whoever they might be. That's fine.
No, that wouldn't happen, joking.
Thank
You know that as well. You've been there yourself. Andrew was next, and then Jim. Okay.
I was looking for clarification, unless Andrew's on the same point.
Is it the same point, Andrew? The point? Are you? When you're right, yeah. Okay, Jim.
The clarification is, are we giving members delegated authority to change the view that's taken by them to this committee? That's one point. The other point is, can we have a report sometime on what this strategic partnership actually does and who compiles the membership of it? Because I wouldn't like to think when a member was going away for here and then changing their mind and voting on some other view or opinion on papers. If we send members away from here, it should be a clear direction unless we've given them delegated authority to change that.
We respect, and I think this full council gives it signed up to the thing, and they're representing the full council, not this committee. That's the position, the strategic partnership. That's my understanding. Leader, have you anything to add on that?
If it's not full council, it'll be policy and resources, but it's one of the two committees.
Thank you. So it is answerable to a council committee, yeah, but not this one. Okay. Andrew, did you want in?
Thank you, Chair. Having exercised immense patience, I'm pleased that you've allowed me to come in. Most of the points I was going to raise have actually been already raised, but we have focused very much on option B, and I would actually like to hear from Alan whether if we could drill down a bit more on the single service model and the real concerns that he may have on that particular option, especially in view of the fact that, I have every confidence in the staff group, which is mentioned in 3.2.2, which is in the report. And I don't see how we would lose out with such qualities and skills. Not only that, I think that it might in actual fact be an option which opens up greater working partnerships with many other authorities within the whole of Scotland. And I'd be interested to hear your views on that.
It's the view to date, and it's not only my view, I've tried to bring things together, is that the original argument for the creation of a single service was to declutter the landscape. The Commission on Women Offenders suggested there were over 200 organisations involved in the planning and delivery of community justice services. The proposal to create a single national community justice service and to remove the CJAs, plus the fact that we've already seen some changes through the creation of Police Scotland, would reduce the cluttered landscape from 200 to 184. It would still require, if we are to deliver support services to support the work of criminal justice social work staff, from housing, health, etc., as establishing an ongoing working relationship with our local partners, as well as some of the national partners. The current model, which broadly reflects a much more localised model, allows us to have ongoing working relationships with the Risk Management Authority, with the Scottish Social Services Council, the Care Inspectorate, and the Scottish Prison Service. So we're still able to achieve some of those things at a national level. The concern is to move to a single service may diminish the working relationship at a local level, particularly with some of the non-justice services that exist within the local authority, particularly key players such as health and housing, as I mentioned, but also we would run the risk of the funding arrangements reflecting population size rather than need. And there's already some examples come out. The creation of a national mentoring service for women offenders has seen as being allocated within Dumfries and Galloway one worker to deliver that service, with the suggestion that we could split them half-time east and half-time west. They would then, in my calculation, spend most of their life travelling, because part of the job would be travelling to Court and Vale to visit prisoners, as well as providing the support once they're in the community. And that was based on our population, rather than looking at the demographics. So a real concern in terms of the funding arrangements as well. But the divide between criminal justice staff and others being employed by a national service as opposed to those working within the local authority. And the role of the Chief Social Work Officer in actually defining how that work was carried out would create a tension that is, created some concerns around it and some anxieties. There may be some strengths, and it would probably allow us to establish better working relationships with some of the national organisations at a governance level. But still, in the balance, the view has been that the positives of this are outweighed by the positives from particularly the local model and our capacity to engage with the non-justice services. But as I said in the report, and also alluding to the issues around option B, at 3.2, I've highlighted the need for strategic partnership if they take, by and large, the responsibility for organising all of community justice services. It would still leave criminal justice social work services reporting to this committee, but the wider community justice services being developed through a strategic planning partnership. But it quite clearly says that a strategic partnership would have to own the community justice agenda and planned outcomes, but would also have to engage with key national players, some of which are listed, including Police, Crown Office, Procurator, Fiscal Service, Scottish Courts, Scottish Prison Service and the Risk Management Authority.
Can I just say that was actually a very worthwhile discussion you just brought forward there, and I was impressed to hear that in actual fact your suggestion that this area punches above its weight with regards to getting greater finances to assist us with community justice. I think that's beneficial. It's a shame it doesn't reflect it in the report, and we maybe need to have more of that information coming forward so that we can have a much more accurate report.
Thank you. I'm picking up here that there's a consensus that a local authority model is the model we're happy with. Jane, sorry, yeah.
Hello. Can I just ask about the issue of being option B, which we, I think, all do prefer, and those of us who were at the seminar heard more detail about it. But nevertheless, what I don't understand is that option B is driven by the local authority, owned by the strategic partnership. Fine, because I think that's the way that the world is going. But what I want to understand, though, is let's be realistic about this. If it's a local authority model, how can we then insist or make sure that the things that we want to work jointly, like, for example, I believe it's joint programme delivery team, is that right? I mean, if our other partners, local authority partners, don't want to play, what sort of clout have we got to suggest that they do? I'm really sort of saying what is the balance of usefulness with respect to what happens locally, as opposed to whether we value this joint programme delivery team, which we would have no ability to insist happen if we go down the local authority model. I just want to be completely clear. I mean, I instinctively, I think like everybody here, prefers the local model. I think we like to be in charge of our own destiny. But at the same stage, if you're valuing the joint programme delivery team, how can that work in a specifically local authority-driven model?
Alan?
I think it's based on two factors. One, the national standards for delivery of such a service require a certain degree of cost efficiency within it. So it's much more cost efficient to do that on a joint basis than it is an individual authority basis. The second part is that the ongoing working development and working relationship with the Ayrshires would not be diminished in what has been described as B+, because it recognises that, and that's been acknowledged by the three Ayrshire councils, that they would have to work collectively, and from time to time they would have to accede to the need to work with us within Dumfries and Galloway, and that's been important, and the principles of that are outlined in, as I understand it, the submissions going forward from the three Ayrshire authorities. So there's the willingness in the three Ayrshires to continue to work with us, plus the national agenda, the standards for programme delivery require that sort of efficiency of working, on that joint basis, and as outlined in terms of the consulate response, that expectation of shared service, and that's certainly something that's come out and something I would be adding to, and didn't have time to add to because the event only took place last week, so I would add to this in terms of the other part of this is not just about working with national bodies, but ensuring we develop shared services with other council areas where appropriate. But the benefits of that and the ease in which we can do that are probably greater than the risk to how would a national body engage with local players to ensure that the non-justice services were playing their part in the delivery of community justice.
Okay, Jane. Yeah. So, can we move to recommendations then? Obviously, we've noted the consultation. We've noted the options of the redesign. We've noted COSLA's situation as amended and reported by Alan. We're noting the comments, detailed 331 in Appendix 1, and at 2.5 we're agreeing that the preferred option from a council perspective is option B, the local authority model. Yeah.
B plus, if we can do that.
Well, the difference here, the B plus in A is in actual fact is a service delivery, because the model, the three options we have are a local authority model, which is what we're talking about, and it would then be up to the local authorities to take that forward in their cross-border collaboration. And there was was it a reoffending partnership they were talking about setting up, Alan, or something like that?
Just for clarification, in terms of the report as it stands, option B includes the recognition of having to work with national bodies. The added bit is the expectation we continue to develop shared services. That's the bit that's missing. In terms of the other elements, in many respects, the suggestion of a reducing offending partnership that's come from the CJA, in effect within Dumfries and Galloway, would be the strategic partnership, or a subcommittee of that. And over the next while, as I've outlined, it's going to take until the end of this year before a decision is made by government, national government, but then there'll be some 2.5 years after that before anything's put into effect, that we've got a number of things we have to negotiate. And that's one of the things I would suggest in terms of what I've suggested for the strategic partnership we'd have to resolve is where they actually fit community justice expectations within their work, and how do we ensure that this is still a social work-led service, and therefore the criminal justice social work element still reports back to social work committee.
Absolutely, and we can only do it for our council, and if it's the local authority model, we would hope then common sense would come into it in negotiations. All the indications are that common sense will prevail with the authorities. Dennis.
Yeah, could we add in 3.3 with further reports to this committee as appropriate as this goes forward from the COSLA stuff and what happens at the partnership? Just so that we're kept informed.
That's a given that it'll be on the agenda for the future. The minute the reorganisation kicks in and as we head towards it, the same as we were doing with other things. Jock.
Thanks, Chair. It's just 2.5. I'd like to see that amended slightly to agree that the preferred option from a council perspective is option B, the local authority model, and this option, as discussed at Social Services Committee, be the council's formal response. And regards to strategic partnership, they either agree with our response or they put in something separate. They make up their own mind, but they don't amend what has been discussed here this morning.
Well, I don't think we have the power to actually to do that. But again, we'd hope common sense would prevail, and we're set up as we are with the strategic partnership. So we can't tell them what to do, but we can recommend, which is what we're doing.
I appreciate that, Chair, but by the same token, they shouldn't be amending our recommendations. That's my view. That's where I was coming from earlier on when we were talking about this.
Well, as the director said earlier, if they do and we're unhappy, then we just put our own one in. It's as simple as that. But I would say common sense should come out of it, and we should actually get consensus at the strategic partnership. I haven't seen them go against anything that's come from any of the partners at this stage yet, because they've obviously, there's a degree of trust there and a very robust process in terms of reporting and evidence gathering for those meetings. And again, we don't have to add, with due respect, Joe, Social Work Committee, because in actual fact it's a recommendation from the Social Work Committee. Alan, you like back in?
In terms of the point raised by Councillor McKee, the wording of the recommendation in terms of this option, in terms of what comes forward from committee, should form the basis of the Council's formal response to be included in the Dumfries and Galloway Strategic Partnership response. I think that allows that if the partnership submitting a response that's different, the response will still go from this committee in terms of how it stands and what's the outcome. What committee agreed today will still have to be there. And if that differs from the strategic partnership response, then there'll be the two parts that submitted.
Are you happy with that, Joe?
That's fine, Chair, thanks.
I think we'd be in a bad state if we end up with no agreeing at the outcome agreement. The wider process would be gravely in danger. Leader.
Chair, going from past experience, if it was changed, it would be some partner saying, have you ever thought about this? And it would be an actual enhancement that we might not have in the response, but we would be expecting to have. I haven't seen them ever say, oh, don't agree with that, we're going with what we think. But I think it's usually maybe just if anything was going forward from the strategic partnership, it would be an enhancement through some other service that we could help you with this and we would work with you there.
That's absolutely, and as Roberta's saying here, that's the common sense, and that's exactly what will happen, I would suggest. And in the papers for the strategic partnership, we can be absolutely certain that the views of this committee are reflected very accurately. Yeah, okay. And so, with that in mind, then, are we agreeing the preferred option is option B, the local authority model? Yeah, agreed. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the item 5, which is the consultation on the Joint Strategic Plan for Older People 2012-2022. It's a fairly weighted tome, and there's been a lot of work done here, obviously. And Judith, before you start, just maybe pass the thanks to the officers concerned, trying to put things into a process. I think to make it easier and to facilitate this, Judith's got a very short presentation that she's going to give us, rather than talking through it. See the slides and she can talk it through. And then we're going to consider the report.
I hope everyone can hear me. Is that clear enough? I really do welcome the opportunity to be at Social Work Committee to talk about our joint strategic plan. A significant amount of work is going into this across the partnership in Dumfries and Galloway, and under the work that we're doing again as a partnership with Putting You First. I think this joint strategic plan will help inform a lot of work for all of us across the partnership in the years to come. As the Chair said, it's a weighty document. There is a lot in it. It's very complex, but I hope that by taking you through some of the issues, that will help you consider the response of this committee to help us finalise the document that will be the final one that will support us in the months and years ahead. The document focuses on older people's services, and there are some issues in that around about how we support an increasingly older and frailer population. But I like to set a bit of context in and around that about what we're trying to do with the plan. It is about setting a context around the challenges that we have, that we've talked about in various forums over the years. It's to help support a shared vision of how we might address and tackle some of the challenges that we have, but is also a vehicle to promote discussion and a background against which we can consider the way that we work in the short, medium and longer term across all our partnership. The other bit of context around this, whilst it does focus on some of the issues and challenges in older people, I think it is really important when we think about older people, our co-citizens who are older people, about the contribution that they make to our community and to our society. They are significant net contributors to society and to our communities and to our economies. And a modest estimate is that, including tax payments, their spending power as a group of people, caring responsibilities which they provide in an unpaid way, the volunteering effort that we know is significant and is significant certainly in this region, that they actually contribute on a national basis around £40 billion more than they actually receive by way of state pensions, welfare and health services. So I think we always have to bear that in mind when we're thinking about some of the challenges that we face in relation to older people. So they are considerable assets and we need to think of them in that way. However, having said that, we do know that the rising longevity that we're seeing, the increasing age in our older population, that brings with it a degree of complexity around their healthcare and their social care needs, and that's the pressure that we're facing at the moment. We know that 3/4 of people over the age of 75 will have a long-term condition that they will be living with and requiring support with, or indeed treatment for, and that's only going to increase by the time we approach 2030, when we see that increase in that bit of the population. So demands on our system, people needing support, will increase commensurate with the ageing population at the very time when the funding available to us in the public sector is decreasing and under challenge. So the point we're setting out and trying to set out in our document, and indeed in the whole Putting You First programme, is that we have to think differently, we have to act differently, and we have to work differently in order to support this group of people. Main challenges that we have there, I've touched on the decreasing level of public sector funding. That is a given, but next to that is the significant growth in the over 85 population. That's where levels of frailty, levels of complexity are much increased, and with that increased population will come that increase in complexity. More people are living alone, more older people are living alone through either being widowed or through other circumstances. And I think one of the other key messages that I would really like to touch upon is the increasing workforce challenges that we face, because against an increasing population of older people, we'll have a decline in the working age population. So the very people that we will be dependent upon to provide care and support for people will actually be shrinking in number. Our rural issues we are well aware of in this region. How do we physically get across the region geographically? Increasing in fuel costs within that workforce as well brings challenges. And again, I think the importance of our partnership working in and around this, because there is no one single solution that we're going to be able to bring to bear to address this situation. It will be multifaceted, multi-agency, and we will look for and need complex transformational change to address the issues. This slide is a complex one, but it uses hospital beds as a proxy of some of the challenges. And I think if you can see the different colours there, the straight line that you can see on this slide represents the number of hospital beds that we currently have in Dumfries and Galloway, and indeed the number of hospital beds that we will continue to have in our community across even the new build and our community cottage hospital beds as well. The red line there at the top, if we do nothing as a system, and this is about a system issue, hospital beds are a proxy, but our use of hospital beds is highly dependent on good social work services responding to people's needs. If we do nothing about the admission rate, people coming to the hospital needing services, unplanned services, by 2018, so about 5 years from now, we won't have enough beds in our system to be able to respond to that. If we work very hard as a system and we reduce the admission rates, so we support more people at home, we respond earlier, we'll still have challenges in terms of that bed base, but we will extend the years of usefulness up until about 2023, so another 10 years. But if we work exceptionally hard and reduce both the admission rate and the length of stay, we're still faced with challenges with our demographic increase on that bottom line, which pushes out the challenges to 2027. But whatever we do, if we do nothing else, we are going to have challenges in our system. So we have to work very, very differently, because we're already in a very efficient system. So working hard on this basis means that we're going to have to work over and above this level of challenge in order to support the whole system to work So I think it's quite a stark demonstration of some of the challenges we have as a system. We talked a little bit about the very vulnerable people. Obviously, along with physical frailty comes a degree of cognitive impairment with dementia. More and more people in our community with dementia with very challenging behaviours and who face themselves some significant challenges living independently. We know the social care challenges that we face have been discussed here, but if we do nothing else, just following on from that slide about the use of hospital beds, if we don't work differently, we'll need an increase in 150 care home beds in our region at a very time when we know that that sector is challenged by its own financial difficulties. We will need to provide an increase in care at home hours that would equate to around £2.7 million additional to current budgets, and that would increase, if we do nothing else, to about £13.3 million by 2031, just on the basis of that increasing frailty, increasing population, and if we don't act and think differently. I think we know from what we face at the moment that that level of increase in any budget is unlikely. The workforce I touched on, hugely critical aspect of this. We already use in health and social care around 40% of the low-paid workforce in our region. As we continue to need carers working across our system, we will increasingly compete across the health board, local authority, our independent sector, our care home sectors, and other sectors that traditionally employ lower paid workforce. And that's going to be an increasing challenge over the years that we face. I think because of that, we have to work very differently and think about our workforce in a different way and think about how we can develop some shared visioning around the use of that workforce, because they're critically important, and it's critically important that we value them. Things that we can do differently. We can't be dependent on traditional ways of providing care and support. We can't be reliant on our ability to use beds in a hospital in the same way. We can't be reliant on using care at home in the same way. So some of the things that we're already thinking about through our Putting First work is how do we provide accommodation with care? How do we maximise the use of extra sheltered accommodation in the community where people can live at home safely with effective care and support around them that minimises the level of residential care and hospital use, and how we work very agilely with people in terms of step up, step down. We respond quickly to crisis. We work quickly with someone to get them back to a level of independence that maintains them safely, and then we withdraw those services. So that will involve us all working very agilely across the partnership to achieve that. Talking of independence, that's something that we absolutely must do more of. We must help people, we must intervene early, we must re-able people, and we've got some good evidence from the re-ablement service that we have in STARS and across the rest of Scotland and the UK about how re-ablement can help people maintain independence, reduce the levels of dependence that we sometimes see, and reduce the amount of input that we're required to put in the public sector, which means that more of our population will be able to draw down services. And that will involve us in assessing people's needs regularly and working in that more agile way. Supporting carers is critical. Unpaid carers in our region provide a huge amount of support to people. We have, and we were, I think, the first in Scotland to have developed and signed up to a joint carer strategy across our health board and our local authority. And I think that demonstrates the level of commitment that we're putting in, and indeed the level of commitment put in from this council to supporting carers through their carers champions. And we all need to be much more flexible in our thinking in the way that we work, be much more person-centred, help people find the natural community assets that can support them in their independence, and also think about the work that we can do to develop resilient communities that actually are able to provide the sorts of support to people that help maintain them safely. Workforce I've touched upon, critically important because of that declining working age population. There will be more competition amongst us to find a suitable workforce there. I think partnership is critical to this, and obviously we're setting this in the context of joint working that we're already doing. Putting First itself as a joint partnership project across the Health Board Council, our third sector and our independent sector partners. And we've already done quite a significant amount of work as a partnership in managing emergency admissions. That's very challenging work to our hospital. We've got very low delayed discharge rates as a partnership, and that's to be commended. And we use more care at home. We have more people. The balance of people being cared for at home is already very high. We have fewer people than the Scottish national average going into residential care home accommodation. which is, again, laudable, but brings the challenges that we've touched on here. But I think one other key message I'd want to emphasise is that the solution doesn't just sit with social care, it doesn't just sit with the health board, it really is a community issue, an issue for all of us working in this area. Carers, I've talked a little bit about, and I know that you're familiar with the role of supporting carers. We really do need to maintain them in that caring role. It's a stressful role. If we can work with carers to maintain their health and well-being, and we in turn support them in caring for their families. There is more that we can do, and we're looking at, including looking at new technologies, maximising the use of telecare. We can keep people safely at home, and people really welcome the use of telecare. People like it, so that they can keep in touch with carers. We can respond more quickly. We can keep people from being socially isolated. We know that social isolation is a real indicator of poorer mental as well as physical health. So keeping people linked together using technology is a very helpful thing. And it can help us as well in terms of responding quickly and coordinating the work that we do. We've got a broad range of providers out there crisscrossing the region. Technology can help us be really effective and maximise our efficiency around that. And a real facet of the Putting You First programme is really around testing change. There is no blueprint here for an answer. If there was, we would be putting it in place as quickly as we could, knowing what we're facing. But we're testing lots of areas of change. What does work? And if we find something that works, we try and respond quickly and roll that out more broadly. So there's a huge amount of testing of change happening across the programme. Set against all of this is our ambition to ensure that we are keeping services of a sufficient quality for people. We don't want to see a diminution in quality of services as we face the challenges that we do. So looking towards more personalised, person-centred services where people can actually determine and choose how they get that service to maintain its quality. We're doing some work across both this programme and with our acute services redevelopment, which is around redesigning pathways in and out of our cottage hospitals. Again, very valuable, very highly regarded local community services. We need to maximise the use of those. And that might involve us supporting people with more complex health and social care needs within those hospitals. And I think that's an exciting way of using them in the future. And working differently with the care home sector as well. We've seen some really good and innovative use of care home beds to support people living in the community that avoids an admission to a hospital, keeps somebody locally, and in a broad geography such as ours, that can be a very helpful thing for a frail elderly person and their family. We're doing work with registered social landlords, so we can keep people within their own homes. Vast majority of people live in their own homes, so we need to make sure that we've got the support in there, and that will include technology. We're doing work with care providers to really focus on our local communities and sheltered housing so that we're providing the care and support in those tenancies to people so that we maintain them there for as long as possible. And really looking across the piece at handyman services. How do we ensure that people that are supporting people in their own home from a housing perspective are also able to flag where there are concerns of somebody's health or well-being. I talked a little bit about rapid response, acting quickly in the face of crises, getting people back on their feet as quickly as possible, being consistent in our use of reablement so that people are as independent for as long as possible. And that really is about partnership working with health and social care. And we're also doing some work, and you'll be finding out more about this in due course, which is creating an integrated hub of health and social care provision, working with the third sector. And again, we're one of the first in Scotland that's integrated a third sector signposting role within our hub, and that's going to open in Dumfries within the next, I think, within May, and that has our social work team, our allied health professionals, district nursing teams, and a third sector partner working together, physically co-located, making sure that we're coordinated in our response to that population. So a significant test of change, and in the context of integrating adult health and social care, I think something that will be of great interest as we move through that programme. Carers I've talked about, partnership working in terms of all our staff so that we're all aware of what we all do so that we can minimise any duplication of effort, and also thinking about that community resilience. Again, a key facet of the programme and why we're trying to involve as many communities, community groups, third sector organisations and other parts of the the council in this work, because it is much broader than just the care and support we provide for people and with people. Workforce, again, I won't labour the point, but critically important. And obviously this will inform the work we do around integrating health and social care. Our programme takes forward a range of work streams that are focusing on this work. We can provide more information. We have a website that offers that level of detail, and they're focusing on all the elements of challenge that I've talked about, and some of that is set out in the plan itself. We want to ensure that this joint strategic plan remains as relevant as possible. This is a fast-moving environment, and a lot of change is happening. We don't want this to gather dust, so we will continue to use this within the programme to ensure that it's informing the work that we're doing there, and that we maintain the relevance of the data that underpins it and that you see in the technical document. So I think just key questions really will be in the discussion around the paper, but I thought it might be helpful just to get that rattle through and what we think of as the key messages within that. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and the officers who led on this work are also here if there are any technical questions to pick up.
Okay, I'm delighted to see Anne and Jeff here. That's good. I've got two speakers already, Councillor Dick, Councillor Mail, in that order. Anyone? Come back to them in a minute, yeah? Councillor Dick.
Thanks, Chair. I certainly commend the work that's gone into this document. I think it's excellent and probably worth every member in this council reading it. I was interested to hear what you had to say about support for carers, Judith, because I'm not entirely convinced that we do have that right. Indeed, have some evidence that that may well not be the case. But anyway, I'd like to come back to that later on. I have two fundamental things that I think really need to be picked up on this document. 311 and the fourth bullet point. At the partnership boards, apparently, according to this, the need for clarity and governance structures to ensure proper delivery of the Putting You First programme was agreed. That was not my understanding. In fact, my understanding was we were clear and unequivocal that we wanted governance structures put in place, and that was a priority. And the other thing is, in the recommendations, 2.2 seems to suggest, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that every change that's done under the integration would have to keep coming back to Social Services Committee and the Health Board Committee. Could I just clarify if that's the case? If we agree these recommendations as they're written, are we going to have to be hidebound by constant reference to a committee where you have an operational change that can take place? Because that's just going to stymie the whole process.
Judith?
It's certainly in my view that the Joint Strategic Plan and the work that we do underneath that will continually need to come back to committee for endorsement. The Joint Strategic Plan sets a context, direction of travel and some background data and information about why we would want to be taking forward the work that we are. The governance structure that we've got in place around the Putting You First programme was set up at the start of the programme 2 and a bit years ago. The Community Health Social Care Partnership Board was quite keen to ensure that we now have the appropriate links up through the Partnership Board rather than just through the Programme Board and to the Health Board. And I think the discussions that we'll take forward now about how we do that will provide that clarity of focus in terms of its governance. I'm not sure if I've answered your question.
Ian?
No. First of all, if I could be absolutely clear, that statement in 311 is not what I understood. It does not reflect what we agreed at the time. And I think the concern has been that given the Partnership Board was set up in 2008, we still don't have the kind of governance structures for the Partnership Board, more on the health side, that we do within social services through the council. We've got clear governance structures, which I don't think, and I think that if I'm correct in saying, Chair, that the Partnership Board agreed, we're not simply not there when we discussed this at the last Partnership Board, and that statement does not reflect what we asked for, which was governance structures to be put in place.
Okay, we'll come back to that in a minute or two. Dennis, and then Leader.
Yeah, Chair, well, welcoming the report. I mean, I think this report's taken something like 4 years to get to this stage, from start to finish. And what I'm going to be slightly parochial here, because what concerns me is I've seen putting you first in action, and I've now seen it in action for 2 years probably. And I've got a community that's now saying, when are there going to be some outcomes from this? We've just closed our old folks' home. We've got planning permission for a new one. We've got planning permission for sheltered housing. But all we see is talk and closures. And there really is a message out there that says, when are we going to act on some of these fine things and these fine words to help develop communities? We've got a cottage hospital that is guaranteed to stay, but its building is unfit for the future, for beds. And the community of Esdale are just saying, we've talked, we've turned up at meetings, we've talked more, but when are we actually going to see some action? Because we now need to see action on the ground, because everybody knows the problems and everybody now is consulted and talked out.
Okay, I think your concerns and your passion obviously coming across here, Dennis, but we're not actually discussing putting you first here today per se.
It was picked up, Chair, so I'm just using the right to come back and say that is one of the tools being used within this document, or for this document.
You're using your years of experience, committees to get your point across, you're absolutely right. And it's no lost on me. Before we move on to the next, to the leader, we also had a presentation at DG First a couple of days ago on the STARS programme, and I was actually going to suggest at the end, seeing you've raised it, that we should have a presentation at this committee, either in a seminar form, I would suggest, rather than the full committee, both from STARS and PYF, to actually, so that members are actually aware exactly what's happening and the progress and everything else, where we can actually sit down and discuss, and maybe a less formal setting, with the officers involved in those two processes. And because we kind of look at it, that one's managed by DG First, as you know, and the other one is like a board, which is kind of separate. So with your leave, I would actually suggest that we can arrange that and bring that forward as a specialist seminar with both of them here at the same time, because I think it's crucial because they work together, right? Where you can ask as many questions as you want and get as much stuff. In the meantime, if you have something specific, can you take it up either with John or Judith, or in the short term? Is that, you happy with that just now as a way forward today? Yeah. Leader?
Chair, on the presentation that we were given, there was a lot of whatever we do, we have to change. Now, my understanding, there has been 1-2 years of putting you first. I suppose my question, what have we done to deliver some change? Maybe that's something that needs to come back to the seminar, or actually a paper to this committee, because I'm not sure if we've been cited other than through the Health and Social Care Partnership of how putting you first is coming forward. More rapid pace, yes, I welcome that in the thing. It does need to happen quick, because I know within the next 2 or 3 years we need to have shifted this. We have the new hospital coming on board. That'll be fixed with the bed numbers, and we don't want to really be sitting here in 4 or 5 years' time saying, actually, we built it too small, we needed to move the services. One of the concerns I had through possibly some of the plan, it's a lot of, these are the issues, but there wasn't much of, this is how we're going to resolve the issue, as in, this is an action. Maybe strategy and action plans are different than that. I'm more of an action sort of person rather than strategy. Well, and it's down to that line that a lot of what was being here, we need to keep people out of going to hospital. We need to look at better housing. We need to adapt things. If I was looking at it from a council hat, we have to pick up the bill, because a lot of those services are council services through, integration, hopefully will be both. But where, we have this smaller hospital, we have to change this pattern, but from the look of it, we have to change it by, I would say, about 50% to actually create the capacity to allow us as a council to have the resources to actually deliver on the better housing, how we get to people quicker and we make sure that they don't end up in the acute hospital. How are we going to achieve that?
Yeah, magic wand.
Possibly with a drum roll. That's at the crux of the challenge that we face. I think it is a broad partnership approach. The strategic plan does reflect the context that we're working in, the challenges that we face, and I think it's would be a very helpful action to have a focused workshop on putting you first, because the how will we get there is set out in a lot of detail in the work plans that those work streams are taking forward. That's where the detail of, well, what is it doing? Because the reality is it's doing a lot on the ground, a lot is happening, and I appreciate that we haven't been able to give you the detail within the Joint Strategic Plan, which is about supporting some of that planning work. So I would certainly welcome, and I know that the team would welcome that opportunity to have a workshop where we could go through in detail some of the work that's happening on the ground. And I think importantly as well, how we'll measure the impact that work is taking place. The programme has a evaluation programme at the back of it, so that we can really understand what it is that's making a difference in some of these elements. The broader issue around the engagement with other agencies, I think, is very, very important. Part of what we're doing within the programme is something called the Integrated Resource Framework, and information on that will come forward. We've already had a paper to the Community Health and Social Care Partnership Board on the financial work that's sitting underneath that. So us beginning to map where the spend is will help us go into those discussions as a partnership of some of the broader contribution, or indeed how we shift the balance of those budgets to address some of the broader challenges away from more traditional services.
Thanks, Judith. Jock and then Roberta.
Aye, thanks. It's an excellent paper and an awful bit of reading. And to be honest with you, I didn't get this to Saturday. We really could have done it a week earlier, and fair enough, that's a lot of work for yourselves, but thanks very much for all the work you've done. And Judith, I must thank you for your presentation up there, where you said that older people were an asset. That's absolutely brilliant. I wish you'd put it in bigger print. Some people didn't believe it. There's two or three questions, actually, and I appreciate where other people are coming from. But on page 57 of 176, he said, development of appropriate housing to meet the needs of older people are a key consideration. And the difficulty we've got, I'm not quite sure whether the welfare reform is affecting older people or going to affect older people, where an extra bedroom would be an asset for them, where they're living, rather than a single bedroom accommodation that are trying to push people down onto at the present moment. And you're talking here about overnight and respite care on page 59. They've got 300 older people receive some form of respite care, and 590 included overnight stays. What sort of conditions are these carers entitled to on overnight stays? Are they entitled to sleep on the job, if you like, or are they expected to stay awake all night? Because obviously that affects appropriate housing and all that sort of thing as well. Just if you could clarify that for us. And I've got other things, but I can bring them in later on, Chair. Thanks.
Plenty of time, Jock. Free and frank discussion. Okay, Judith?
I can't answer the question in detail around the impact of welfare reform on older people in this situation, because I'm not fully, I don't fully understand what that impact will be, but certainly for other groups, the issue around the single bed, the spare bedroom is an issue. It's worth probably pointing out that probably the majority of older people live in private accommodation, their own accommodation as well. So our ambitions around that would be to ensure that wherever an older person lives, we're able to support them for as long as possible appropriately there. Page 59, the respite care, the overnights in relation to older people will relate more to overnight stays in residential accommodation. We have contractual arrangements with care homes so that people can access a respite bed in a care home. There would be very few older people in our community getting an overnight respite where the carer's coming into their home. They may make private arrangements about that, but overnight care of that sort is usually provided for adults with, for example, a learning disability or a mental health problem. And the type of overnight support would depend on their needs. But largely for older people, it'll be care and a respite in a care home bed.
Yeah, absolutely, Joe. Yeah.
Would that mean they're in permanent homes, Judith, or would they go at the home at night and come back to their own home during the day?
Usually a period of respite would be booked. So, for example, somebody would want a weekend and they would stay within the care home for that weekend. So it's for tends to be for a block period, often where the carers themselves are looking for a break or are on holiday, and it would be for a set period of time. So it would be overnight as well as daytime respite.
Okay, I've got a number in. I've got Roberta first, Ian, then Jim, and then back to you, Jock.
Thank you, Chair. The leader touched on the crux of the matter, the doing, and I'm also a very practical person. And we've talked for years about what we're going to do in rural communities, and I wonder if any consideration has been given to actually selecting a very rural area and looking at all the impacts, very small improvements could bring about. Has any research been done in that area?
Yes, part of the programme is looking at what we're calling pathfinder areas. So we've taken a geographical approach, although the Change Fund that underpins the programme is national and for the whole region, and we are testing change right the way across the region. We're focusing some of those changes in specific geographies, one of them being Dumfries, obviously a more urban area, but looking at very remote rural areas, Langham and the Esk Valley, Annan and its surrounding areas as well. So we are looking and focusing at some of our more remote communities and considering the small tests of change that make a difference, looking at carer support groups, reminiscence groups. We're doing work around telehealth, so helping people access through the technology, access consultant appointments to help reduce and minimise the amount of travel that's involved in that. We're doing some work with our caring organisations to ensure that they're able to provide efficient and effective support. So there's a lot happening, and we would certainly welcome an opportunity to go into some of that in detail. But obviously, one of the key aspects for us is the rurality of the area. So hence why we're focusing on those areas and working very directly with people in communities. There's been a huge amount of consultation and participation with individual people in those areas to help us shape the future of those services.
Just very briefly, community resilience is another area, obviously, which connects with my interest. Have you connected with welfare groups in individual areas? Because in most areas, there are welfare groups that perhaps put on one function, Christmas dinner, for instance. But there are lots of people within that and on the periphery of it that might be able to offer other resources, such as pubs offering lunches, etc. The green deals to make sure the houses are all insulated and warm, etc. Because in the rural areas, which you've highlighted in the assessment, they're mainly stone houses and they really need external cladding if they're not in conservation areas. So there are lots of little things like that, even to build up the community resilience, plus even a point that you can have a generator at. It's similar to the weather we've just had in the last few weeks.
Certainly in the area-based pathfinders, our ambition is to involve as many people in those communities as possible to help us develop and, in the jargon, co-produce the sorts of supports. Community resilience is one of our work streams, really looking at those areas, and indeed work that my colleague Anne Stevenson's leading around how we support local community cafes, pubs, hotels in providing those sorts of networks for older people is something, a programme that we're about to get started with, just recognising that for some of our very small communities, that will be of real benefit to the provider as well as the people there. So we're always looking to involve as many people as possible. And in the work that we're doing, particularly in and around Langham, our colleagues from community services are very, very involved in that piece of work, so drawing in their expertise too.
Ian, then Jim, then Joe.
Just on 3.1, the second sentence says that the PYF is overseen by a multi-agency programme board which reports on its activity directly to the NHS board. Should it not also be reporting to the Community Health and Social Care Partnership Board? And the second thing is minutes of the Social Services Committee, and indeed any local authority committee, are available publicly. What happens to the minutes of the health board meetings? Who do they go to? Are they just seen by the health board? Or, who else sees them?
Just thinking in relation to your first point, the reporting structure was set up a couple of years ago, and I think reflected where the finances for Putting First, the Change Fund, is routed through the Health Board. So consideration in terms of their accountability for that funding, the link to the Health Board in terms of its reporting is an appropriate one. I think when we discussed this at the last Community Health and Social Care Partnership Board, there was certainly a keenness that it now also reports to the Community Health and Social Care Partnership Board. And I think when we secure agreement through NHS structures around that, we will want to be taking it there so that we can have that discussion, because I think this work around Putting You First, the strategic plan itself, will be very important to how we take forward integration locally. My understanding of Health Board minutes is that they're publicly available on the NHS's own website. And I'm sure if I went back and looked, I could find the link for where they are, but they should be there. And the minutes from our Putting You First programme board are also available on the Putting You First website too. So we're aiming to be as transparent as possible in the decisions that we're making around that programme too.
Yeah, but very briefly on the yeah, back in that, Ian. I just ask, with regards to the reporting to the partnership board, when do you envisage that happening? Because the scope of the Putting You First clearly is a driver for integration. So when are we talking about? Is it dependent agreement at the NHS level, and then it can go to the partnership board? How long is that going to take?
We've got our next Community Health Social Care Partnership Board on the 9th of May. We have Performance Committee on Monday. The aim had been for a discussion at the last Performance Committee. We weren't able to take that then, time reasons, so we would aim to have that discussion Performance Committee on Monday, and then the Partnership Board will have that role, presuming agreement at Performance Committee.
Thank you. Jim?
Thanks, Chair. Just to go back to housing, Judith, and just a couple of things. The first, and I'm pleased that we have recognised that there's a value in that, and it does reflect and does affect elderly folk. And I don't think social landlords sometimes give enough consideration when they're doing housing allocations, because antisocial behaviour, etc., affects the well-being of elderly people who are exposed to that. And I think that's something we need to look at. And the other thing, and I'm sure you'll forgive me for my senior moment, I can't mind why we did it, but we had supported accommodation. We had accommodation across the region where we had a warden and a localised care call system where maybe 10 properties, if the resident pulled the cord at night, the local warden went. We abandoned that particular arrangement, to my mind, to the detriment of the communities and the individuals. And it's nice to see we're reviewing it, but it just seems to be a shame that we need to learn that it's essential before we go back to what we were doing in practice anyway. I can't remember why it happened, but we definitely did have these arrangements in place in Dumfries and Galloway at the time we had the housing services and the social housing responsibility. And I'm pleased to see that being developed again, Judith.
Do you need a response, or are you just quite happy?
As long as she nods her head in the right direction, it'll be fine, Chair.
With a high-speed rail link to Sanka. Aye, absolutely. Okay, Jock and then Willie.
Hi, actually, I circled this paragraph, and actually we got an email about it. And councillors ignore him. Councillor Scobie is probably going to talk about it. This landlord accreditation Scotland, we're just wondering who they were. I think it's important that we have somebody that, or some way of monitoring what sort of accommodation private landlords are given to the elderly, or given to anybody for that matter, and ensure that we can inspect it, or that we have inspection arrangements in place. So it's just, if that was the kind of line you were thinking about, Judith, that's on page 91 of 176. Fourth tick down.
That may be one that I need to get back to you on in terms of the detail of that. We're saying.
See, I'm not sure that private landlords are licensed, are they? Or are they?
I believe they are, I think. Leader, you want in?
You have to have landlord registration now, and I think all private landlords are not required to go through it, but are encouraged to go through it. And I think it does affect payments if they don't go into that scheme, because they can't access as much as, you know, welfare stuff.
Thanks for that clarity. I think we need to take that advisory joke and get a response back from elsewhere with the correct line of expertise, isn't it? I take your point now.
I think it's something that we need to be comfortable with and ensure that the accommodation that's being supplied is up to standard.
Willie, you wanted in?
Thanks for inviting me in, Chair. Chair, I think it is a pretty weighted document. I think everyone has recognised that, and there's a lot of work being put into it. But in my opinion, it can only be of any value if it assists in how we prioritise our services, particularly in the preventative care, that in health and social care. Because, you know, Judith refers that we don't have a blueprint in terms of how we resolve it. I think that's correct. But, you know, it's how do we square the circle in terms of demand that is increasing and funds reducing. So in actual effect, what we're doing is firefighting rather than delivering the services that are needed and how we do it. Because if we turn to, and I think it's been made more than once today, in terms of that it's all very well having a joint strategic plan, but what we need to go alongside this is sight of the actions that we're going to take over the next year. Because in the summary on page 98, I think it lays it out in terms of the challenges that we face, and without, you know, going over every one, as we should be doing, there are some 16 challenges, pretty heavy challenges that we will face over the coming years, and not just, you know, by 2030, as the detail was to the graphs and everything. We face these now, and we continue to face them. Because if we take, again, comparing, like, for instance, 7 and 8, on the figures that are presented in terms of the over 85s, then it reflects on the over 65s, and what we'll be facing is 1 in 4, and maybe more, that will face dementia. So it will. And against that, we've got to see how are we going to deal with that, not only in terms of strategic housing, but the services we deliver, and indeed there is personalisation referred to. How do they purchase these services, and are the services going to be available, either in the public or private sector? So there are huge challenges, and it's not just the presentation or the document, but rather the actions that follow so that we can prioritise the services in a decreasing funding situation. Because we're going to need that, and we perhaps have got to need it against the broader terms of setting budgets on each year. And rather than continually look for a decrease and working to within budgets, it may be that social work has to prioritise, and the council, not just social work, but the council has to prioritise its services. Because then the other important parts to this one, or this document, is pages 73, 74, 75, where it's the first sign of feedback from the service users. And some of the detail don't always square with what's in the document. Like, for instance, on page 78, it says, I remain unconvinced there is a joint working in hospital between medical and social work staff. In my view, the discharge process is one of the poorest aspects of being an older person in Dumfries and Galloway. And we've got to get it right, because I've faced cases where we are discharging people to become prisoners in their own homes because they're being discharged into houses that they can't get out of. And the adaptations have not been put in timorously to allow discharge. So while the figures, right, you're going out, we've got to also make sure that there is social care that follows us alongside their own care plan, which many, because that strikes again on the start, anyone with strokes, then they get the 6 weeks of intensive care, and then they wonder, what's happening to me after this? And that in itself a huge worry to them. So while the document is here and welcomed, then it's got to be followed up with more intensive discussion, debate, in terms of how we prioritise our service. The last point, I thought Ian was going to come back on it, and that's to the carers, and I'm grateful for the assistance I got from Anne Stevenson, because there are carers out there, and many of them are of an older age, either looking after husband or wives, vice versa. And they in themselves need care, but they don't see it. They don't recognise it because they're so devoted to their loved one that they're concentrating all their time on that. And I know reference has been made to respite and everything else, but it's the information and assistance we provide to those people. And while there's reference made in this document and the importance of carers, we don't, I often feel, are we really just paying, lip service to it? And that's not a criticism of those that are in the service, but rather there is no identification in terms of an action plan that says, yes, we do recognise you and this is what we are doing to assist. And that was highlighted in the discussions I had with one of the care homes in Stranraer in terms of what they want in terms of their needs. So Chair, it's not so much a question, but indeed the questions have been asked. Where do we go with this document in terms of finding what the services are, how do we prioritise, and what's the action plans that we are able to deliver on these? And that's the challenge for us, to examine every one of those challenges that we have in this summary to see how are we going to deliver the services that we know are going to be fit for purpose and that they will respond to the needs of the people out there.
Willie, to sum up if I can what you said, it's well made, your point. The assessment of need is crucial. Right? At time they're leaving the hospital, they're in their homes, or wherever that care is going to take place. We are today discussing the strategy document, which sets out what our aspirations are, what we should be heading towards, and I would suggest that will then pick up in the next stage of the process, where we'll be setting out the action plan over the next 5 to 10 years, taking it in steps. Dennis, would you like to come in first? And I've just remind people, we're not talking about putting you first here, we're talking about a strategy for older people.
No.
Right, putting you first is a separate entity altogether, although an integral part of it. Yeah.
In fact, you just made the point that this is a document for the next 5 to 10 years to put the strategy in place. Over the last 10 years, we've been talking about the demographic time bomb that was going to hit Dumfries and Galloway with the elderly. I think following this document, we're looking at a nuclear explosion, because I think that's what it's highlighted, is we have got very serious problems. And my question was, following on from Willie's, is have we even started to consider the bodies we're going to need to deliver this service? Because there are not going to be enough young people in this region to actually deliver it. And 5 or 10 years is too late, because in 10 years' time, we're going to need all those bodies. And the young people I've talked to, the last thing they want to know about is this. They're going to take off out the region and go look for something else. So I think we've got a massive issue that we need to start addressing through education and whatever. And we're going to need to bring in 50,000 people from outside to do the job, and I think it's in here all the way through. That's what the need is going to be, massive amounts of people really coming in to man care homes and to do the care sector. And I think we've got to have a plan in place starting now and working with education how we actually deliver that.
I couldn't put any better myself. John.
Thanks, Chair. It's just in the document, a good document, but as I say, I don't see any mention of the day centres in this, which are quite, as I say, they're part of the care for the elderly as well. As a fact, we've got the day centres here, they're getting their support workers withdrawn from there because they're just being classed as more or less an employee, and they do a very good job in some of these day centres, these care and the support services. As I say, and the day centres really do quite a good job, rather than they take people in there, they give them the social side of different things like, and I see no mention of day centres in this report.
So is that then? Page 111. I don't think I'd take no exception to John is actually doing an excellent job. The day centres, no, quite a good job, and they are the commitments already here from this council. They will be integral to the whole care of older people, and maybe even more. Right, if they're off a mind, a lot will depend on how it goes forward from here on in, and how we use our community resources, of which the day centres are one, and the very able workforce within them. I'm just looking here. I've got Jane to come in next.
Thank you. I've been listening quite carefully, and I've just have jotted down things that are not particularly, I think, cohesive. But the issue about hospital beds is simply a measure of an immediate problem that is going to, I think, come forward. It's one of the ways that we can easily measure, I think. And I don't think it's the whole story. It's simply a symptom. And I go back to the issue of what Willie is saying, which is absolutely right. We've got to know what's happening, which I think, and I would suggest that the joint needs, the needs assessment, oddly enough, actually, should have come first, if you know what I mean. You put the needs assessment first, and then you look at the joint strategic plan, which flows from that needs assessment, which I think would have been maybe a more logical way of reading it. It's an extremely comprehensive document, and I do thank the staff for putting the whole thing together. It's been really a bit of an eye-opener. I would say I think it lacks specific information with respect to the integrated finance framework, resource framework. I think that was a very interesting piece of information, also showing where the spread of resources was, and it should be part and parcel of what's going in here. The hierarchy of costs, by the way, if you're talking about hospital beds, I think that would be useful to focus people's minds. The hierarchy of weekly costs, whatever it is, £18,000 for a hospital bed, going down to home care weekly costs, and showing people, what that looks like and why it's so important that we spread the resources. The other thing that I was going to go on to say is that Dennis's point about putting you first, I agree. This is not about putting you first. Putting you first has been used to deal with a couple of things which have been thrown up on a pilot basis. And reading through this, actually, there is the pilots have been taking place in the east and the centre of the region, not in the west. I would imagine that it would be perfectly legitimate for us to have a seminar, indeed, but not one seminar. I'm sorry, that's not what is of meaning to us as the leaders of the social work function, but is just as relevant to all members in an area and locality basis. And I'm afraid to say I think you've got to put together a seminar and deliver it 4 times, but using locality specific information when you go out, so that people actually understand and can map out and get a real handle on what's happening in their area. Dennis's point at that stage then would be the opportunity to say, well, we've had this as a pilot as a result of the work that's been done, and we've only got so far. We need more information. We need to push forward and to get some realization about why, if you made a pilot and had something happen. Do you mind? If we had a pilot, we ought to know what's going on at that stage and what has been delivered and what hasn't been delivered. People talk about delivering services as close as possible to people's localities. Can I say that also comes down to performance delivery, performance management? And that's just as important, that you deliver that locally so people can actually understand and say to their local elected member, the performance that I'm getting, which I had been told I was going to get, I'm not. Or, on the other hand, say that it is good. So I'd like to just put those in there at this stage as well.
Thanks, Jane. I have a couple of second-time or third-time speakers, and Marion wants in as a first-time speaker. Marion?
Thank you, Chair. It's Stranraer Hospital I really want to ask about. I do believe that it's actually not being used to its full potential, and I was just wondering if somebody's able to answer me as to why it's not. Because the thing you hear often more and more is that the fact that people having to travel through to Dumfries all the time. I was just wondering if there's anything that you can maybe highlight on that for me.
I'm not sure it's fair to ask Judith that question, but maybe Judith can take it forward for you and get an answer for you. Yeah.
I think it would probably be appropriate for a request to the medical director or the chief operating officer in the specifics of that question, so that you get real clarity around that, but probably not something I could answer sitting here today.
You okay with that, Marion? Yeah. Aye. The first time speaker on this subject is the leader, and then Ian, and then Willie. Yeah.
Chair, it was just to say that that point has been raised actually at the NHS board at the last board meeting, whereby services that could be delivered in Stranraer weren't, so it is being taken forward.
Slowly taken forward. If it's been 4 meetings, very slowly. Okay. Ian, and then Willie.
I did want to come back on the care for carers issue, but I appreciate very much this is a strategic level, and I don't want to lose the substance of it by discussing it probably inadequately here. So it's something I'd like to maybe take up with you at some other point here.
Exactly. You can either speak to Judith or John after if you want. Take that forward. Willie, is yours something similar, or are you a new subject?
It's to clarify, Chair, because when I spoke, I was responding to the document in terms of the information that was in it. You know, I was not suggesting that the discharge be a separate issue, as indeed Ian, I think, is referring to, that carers should not be a separate issue. It's the overall document. And to give justice to the document, I think it all has to be taken in terms of all the challenges. That's the point I was making. And we've got to hone in on that to see, you know, what it is. And the case has been made more eloquent than I'm making, in terms of that we've got to know what the needs are, and then it follows the strategic document and an action plan how we're going to address it. Because the other one is, and I've asked the director for a separate report on respite in the west of the region. Now that in itself, these are elderly carers who are looking after their siblings, and you know, I am not sure that we have indeed the adequate resources in terms of respite. Now that in itself is a challenge, and we've got to know that we have got the adequate resources, and that it's contained within the strategic plan, not as a separate issue, but as the whole strategic plan, in terms of how we now take this forward. And I was pleased to hear you talk about DASA, and that's another one, and there's reference to one of the comments from a user that says day centres are essential, as indeed the hospital in Stranraer is essential, and it's right to address it to the NHS board in terms of delivery of services, and is it meeting its maximum potential? You know, delivery is in terms of maternity and I've continually asked, but Chair, it's how do we take this forward? Not perhaps by entirely a seminar, but we've got to come to some serious decisions. I've asked the question, how do you square the circle in terms of the funding and prioritising the services within the council setting, not just social work? And I need the answers to those.
Well, I think we all need the answers to them, Willie. Is the proper response to that. We are expecting a service plan and how this is going to be delivered. And taking account of everything you've said up to now, and you're absolutely spot on. I would actually go further and not just talk about the day centres and the ARCs and things like that. It's every single facility we have out there in the community, including the wee pub that's doing the lunch club for the local old folk, right? And the faith groups who are holding lunch clubs and everything else. They're all part of the big equation. And I think that's recognised by Judith's team. I'm maybe fortunate that I've heard this presentation 2 or 3 times, and the more we discuss it, there are recurring themes all the way through, right? And they've been here today, and every time we do it, there is always something new comes out. Jim was wanting in there, but your point is extremely well made, and it's how we take that forward, and we need to make sure that we are involved in monitoring and making sure that that's in place. But Jim, yep.
Okay, thanks, Chair. It's about page 130 and the description of deprivation. And I just have a slight worry that Upper Nissel and Dumfries are cobbled together, because if you read the preamble, it says there are resources available to target, or funding available to target this particular issue. Now, if there are specific, and I'm certain, I know there are, I needn't say I'm sure there are, if there are specific deprivation areas within our region, we should be able to identify them, highlight them independently, because I'd like to see how many people are in deprivation per head of population in Upper Nissdale rather than tie them in Dumfries and Galloway, because that gives a false complexion on the situation. And I realise that the paragraph there says it's difficult sometimes to identify issues in rural areas. But if you're identifying Upper Nissdale as an area, you can then get into the more detailed examination, I would have thought, of statistics. And I'd be happy to see that. And it's something that Judith and I can share, I'm sure. But it worries me that it's tied with Dumfries, because it doesn't give a true picture of the situation in that particular locality. And I would look to, but we've talked about this before in a different forum, and I'm sure we will. I think you chaired the thing when I had the discussion, Chair. We will address it, but I'd just like to see it in documentary form, if that would be possible, please.
Yeah, well, that's easily available from the statisticians and through the SIMD website, I understand, right down to specific parts of the postcode. So it gets right down into the ward in very specific areas, and depending on which of the indicators you're using. I'm not going to steal Judith's job here, but it was my day job before I took this on. So
no, I just think it'd be nice to see it featured alone in conjunction with the other 5 that are here, so we can get a picture. A picture tells, oh, it's better than 1,000 words. Is that the story, Judith?
Especially for the men, eh? Absolutely. You said it, Jim, not me. Right, I think that's everybody. I'm getting the overwhelming thing around the table today that we are extremely happy with the quality of the report being put in front of us. Yep, absolutely. We are obviously very happy with the very clear presentation from Judith, everything else. There's a couple of things have been coming across here all the way through, and I'd kind of thought these would be, given what's happened at the Partnership Board and given what's been getting discussed elsewhere in the Council. I've got a couple of recommendations to make. My suggestion is, I've actually got them typed up. I will pass them around, and we can either do one of two things. We can have a 15-20 minutes for a lunch now, look at them and then come back and consider them, or they're basically the way forward that in terms of governance and in terms of how this plan will be used in the future and how it will be amended and updated and things like that. So with your leave, I'll pass them around now. If you feel we don't need to have a break, we can just read them.
The other 2 items are very, very brief. I would say we deal with this and be done with it.
Well,
Chair.
Yeah, I was just giving you the option. Yeah. Okay, where I'm coming from in this is that we need the plan to influence the integration of health and social care, which is probably the most immediate thing. It also reflects a wee bit that putting you first, I would hate to call it a pilot because it's more than that. It's a way of working, but it's not the only part of integration. And the motion at the bottom reflects, I feel, and I'll be prepared to stand corrected by the other members of the partnership, the discussion that took place there about the governance of the Putting You First board. Now, my understanding, and I think I'm right, John, is that we do have council employees on the Put You First board, and Put You First, and on the board. Yeah. Right. So, whilst the money came through the change fund and managed by the NHS, there is an HR function, i.e. our staff are actively involved in Putting You First, and there is no accountability back to the council. Now, I think that's what we had, that's what's come out of the discussion today, and I didn't get any dissent from that at all. We need to get reports back. Now, the suggestion I've made is it's done through the partnership board, because that is a delegated subcommittee from here, and through that then it would come back to here. Now,
we have the authority to insist that this particular request is complied with.
My understanding, because I did seek governance advice, is that it's the competent motion. Willie?
Yeah, Chair, it's just clarification. I'm not quite sure what this is actually saying, and I think you have said that you're talking about the sub-committee that sits on the Community Health and Social Care Partnership Board, but that doesn't get back to us all, or at least to all the groups on the council, because I believe that's a proportionality committee, so I have reservations about that one. But, you know, clarification I need is the Putting You First. Do they actually look at the whole structure of funding and the shaping of services and what those would cost and everything else? Because alongside this recommendation, I do not see, you know, us honing in on the needs assessment, as indeed it refers to into two of the recommendations, the report recommendations, and, if you like, back to the council and perhaps the Policy and Resources Committee, or whatever structure is going to be set for 2014-15 setting of the budget, the discussions that go ahead, where some of the health and social care services may need to be recognised as requiring more priority spending. I'm not sure if this actually deals with this. All this says is that we want access to the Putting You First working group or officer group without actually addressing the issue or the prioritising of the services. And I think that as a social work committee, we need to work through the whole document and the challenges, whether that goes alongside Putting You First, Community Health and Social Care Partnership Board, it's social work in line with the council's priorities. We need to work through this, and I don't think that's touching it.
Well, I tried to encompass what you're saying there, Willie, and I take your point about the holistic needs of the family, for example, to take it that way, which is why I've got other relevant planning considerations within the lifetime of the plan, because all these things, this is a movable feast, because we can't be prescriptive here now and then expect what we decide today as to be fit for purpose in 8 years' time, for example. Right? So it has to be able to be movable, has to be able to allow officers to reflect the change in national legislation, local policy, whatever it is. You're straying into the actual operational workings of the people who are doing the assessment. Now, I take your point. It's integral, because that is a crucial part of the process. And it absolutely has to be, right? That is the centrepiece to the process, is a proper evaluation of what the person's needs are, or what the family's needs are. Right? Now, that's an operational matter. We're setting out the principles. That's the reason I've done it this way. And there's a limit to how far we can drill down here today and discuss, or else we'd have a paper that was that big, if we were covering everything. So, is there something you're wanting to...
Yeah, Chair, because you're misinterpreting what I'm saying. I'm not suggesting that I go in and start doing an assessment on an individual or individuals. That's done by officers. That's an operational issue, as you rightly say. It's once those assessed needs are done, then you've got to be able to respond to the needs financially and be able to say, well, we've got enough resources on which to deliver whatever service it is. Now in a decreasing, and I think the slide demonstrated that, as demands increase and funds decrease, it's how do you square that circle? And it's for this social work committee, along with the council, to determine, are we putting enough resources into it? And whether it's this year, next year, and as Dennis says, over the next 10 years, we've got to be able to respond to that. And by just having access or some governance way of doing it and putting you first, doesn't it address that issue in terms of what the prioritising the services and having adequate funding available? That's what I'm saying. Not to start delving into assessing the needs.
It's a separate issue, and as we said earlier on, and I thought we had consensus round the table that we're looking at this as a strategic document and the way forward, our vision for the future. Right? The plan that comes out of the action plan that comes out of this by the respective partners will determine, and that's for the assessments and everything. That's what I'm saying to you. That has to be drawn up, not by us, I would suggest, but that needs to be drawn up by officers, because we don't have that information. So, and then it comes back to us for consideration. So what I'm trying to get here is a form of words that will actually meet the needs, meet everyone's wishes that I'm picking up till now. And then the second part, it'd have to be a motion, is about a direct line of communication and governance and accountability to this council. Because at this moment in time, we have council staff in a pilot project, right, which there is no governance process for us to work with. Right? So that needs to be clarified and needs to be rectified. Now, that was the view of the subcommittee. That decision was taken, that's my understanding, round the room here, and that's not reflected in the plan. So I'm suggesting that we need to make a motion to actually make sure it is in the plan, right? And that this committee requires that governance process to be put in place. That's the reason we've gone this way. Right? This has nothing to do with individual issues or how we're going to deliver in the future. This is quite very specific. The first part in 2.2 is the way forward, your aspiration, and the motion at the bottom of there is to ensure there is a governance process put in place. Right? We've asked for it. Now we're asking more strongly, we are coming forward as a committee saying we require it. Now, that was my feeling around the room, that everyone was saying that accountability wasn't there. We don't know what the hell's going on in our own wards, right? Never mind within our own department. So that's why we need the reports coming back. Ian, you want in?
Aye, just if I understand what you're proposing here correctly, that would allay the fear I had that basically every time we want to do something in integration, it's got to go back to 2 boards and it holds the whole thing up. If that's an assurance that this will enable us to get on with it, if you like, then that's fine. And as far as the second bit's concerned, I think that more than adequately addresses the bullet point in 3.11. My only concern is that, and I don't know whether other members recall it, quite clearly we asked for governance arrangements to be put in place, not clarity. We asked for them to be drawn up and put in place, and I'm just concerned that that appears in this way in here.
Absolutely. The way I've worded the motion, in actual fact, is a report to the partnership board as it should be, because that is the board that's looking at the integration of health and social care and been delegated that authority from here. Right? We're happy with that. I'll let you in a second, Jock. So in the second part, you're right. That's exactly my understanding of that last partnership board, is that we were not might like or whatever it was we were wanting, right? Direct accountability. Jock, you want in, and then...
Yeah, Chair, I had concerns about the Community Health and Social Care Partnership Board, that we were sitting on it as councillors, but we weren't getting any guidance for this committee. And I think it is right that it does report back to this committee, and this committee gets a chance to influence the members that sit on that board. And I welcome that. I think some members didn't agree with me, but that's certainly the view I've got.
Sitting next to him doesn't agree with
Aye, so I'll let you move again. I don't know about the budget. Councillor Scobie was on about the budget for it. I don't know whether that will come here or not. That is, given it's a joint budget, it may be that it comes here for, as I say, getting advice, but the decision would be Community Health and Social Care Partnership Board, I would have thought. Maybe no. I'll wait till I see what you've got to say about that.
I would think when the minutes come back here for noting from the Partnership Board, because they will do, and they'll go to full council, that certainly in this committee, there will be the leeway to have a full and frank discussion about what actually took place and what the formal minute is reflecting. I think that's only right, and you're right, and they've all got tongues in their head, right? They're all perfectly capable of saying beforehand, there's an issue here and this needs to be raised. And I would suggest we should, as a committee, we shouldn't be waiting until the formal sit down here to raise an issue. If there's an issue that needs to be raised as a piece of urgency, then come through Roberta or myself, and we'll take it forward and do what needs to be done and take it up through the Partnership Board if that's need be, or put you first board or whatever. I mean, would that sort of allay any fears you've got, Joe?
Sorry, somebody's wanting that recorded just in case I change my mind. No, I think the chance to exchange between the Partnership Board and the Social Work Committee is important. Thanks.
I see Jane's wanting in, but can I just raise a point, Chair? Not only can people take a matter to you and Roberta, I presume they'd have the ability to bring it to Councillor McKee and I as well. Just because we're on the administration doesn't mean to say we can't raise points at the Community Health and Social Care Partnership Board. And you have to be careful in situations like that. You don't try and exclude members from involvement.
No, absolutely not, and you know that's not my style. What I actually was meaning with this committee, right? If there's a problem with this committee, if it's with the Partnership Board, we're all representing the Dumfries and Galloway Council on it, and whilst I might chair it just now, in a year's time that'll move back to the NHS. So I take your point. Jane?
Gosh, I was thinking, I think we're slowly edging our way forward, but Willie asked a perfectly legitimate question, which was, how is this going to be dealt with respect to the budget? How is this going to be reflected in budget deliberations? And I think that's a legitimate question to answer.
What are you talking about, what I'm proposing?
I'm proposing in respect of this plan, you know, how are we going to, I can imagine how, but I want to know from you or from the administration leadership how we are going to take forward budget arrangements which deals with whether we wish to realign our corporate priorities to put more emphasis on this or less emphasis. So that's really what I'm looking forward to hearing.
I would suggest, in actual fact, this, I keep saying, is a strategic document, is our vision and the way forward. The way it's funded then would form reports to respective boards or council committees. I see the leaders wanting in, because we don't per se set the budget for social work, we manage what's there, so that's set elsewhere. So, Leader?
Chair, my understanding there's a report coming in May to full council setting out a way forward with service reviews. That would be the opportunity to feed in which priorities we want to actually put forward as number one priority, and other services if we're in a diminishing budget across the council where we might feel that some services are further down the list in priorities. Not everything can be priority 1, some things have to be priority 10. That will be the council's way of aligning its budget to the priorities it sees. If it sees the priorities within putting you first higher up than some in economic generation or in education, that would be the choice at that time of that committee or of the council. And therefore that would reflect in the council's budget how we're actually taking forward the budget to align it to our priorities in the single outcome agreement.
Thanks, Leader. That's helpful because that actually strengthens the view I've been consistently putting across here. This is a strategic document outlining our vision of what should be happening in the services for older people. How it's funded and resourced then goes elsewhere. This is our dream. This is our wish, for lack of better words. Willie, you're wanting in.
Yeah, Chair, because you maybe can help here, because I'm grateful for the leader in terms of laying out the process and to come back, but to assist this committee in terms of whether it needs to go against all competing interests in other committees that we may sit on, whether we think this is a priority. You could perhaps tell us in the vision and the strategic document that you keep referring to, Chair, whether it's going to cost less to deliver or more to deliver, because there's no indication in the strategic document, because that information is missing. And to allow the committee to do that, then we need a process within the committee, not just in terms of governance to putting you first, working group or whatever it's called, officer working group, but also for this committee to consider, and then whether it, when it goes to full council, Jock, I wasn't talking about the Community Health and Social Care Partnership Board or the integration budget. I was talking about the council's budget, and for us to be able to say whether we feel social work should get more and another less. But if we don't have the information, you can't do it. Could you tell us it's going to take more or less?
Absolutely. I've no a magic wand, so I can't tell you at this moment in time. But my understanding is the budget for this coming year will be coming to this committee in June, 20th of June. That's the first, because the next committee meeting we will be discussing the sign-off of last year's accounts, am I right? Yeah. So we have to have the two processes. One is to get out of the way, and then the next one kicks in. So that's where that's just the way it is. And you've been here for long enough, you know how it works, right? So the June committee is when the detailed budget for this committee. No, Willie, that's the situation.
Chair, I was not talking. This year's budget's set. It's next year's on 14-15 and how we influence 14-15 in terms of priority. The leader's already laid out that a paper's coming in June, I believe he said, that'll lay out that process. And it's not for 13-14, it's set. It's for ensuing years.
Right. In future, can we be absolutely precise in what we're talking about here? Because, right, what we're saying is the budget that's already been set for this financial year for this department is coming to the June meeting. Right? What the leader was talking about is the work for the year after that, which is a totally separate issue. And then we will be discussing that at a later date. Right? So it won't be getting discussed in June, right? Because that budget setting process will not have been gone through. So we will be discussing in June this financial year's budget setting, budget and how it's got to be monitored. Okay, that's where we are. Let's move. We need to move on here a wee bit. Is there anybody got anything that I want to see in this yet?
So just briefly, Chair, and you're absolutely right, and I'm glad everybody's grasped that now. And I think we've already dipped our toe in the water in terms of how much the social work budget will be transferred to Community Health and Social Care Partnership Board, and that will be brought to this committee as well, because the Social Care Partnership Board will have a budget of its own. And the only other thing I want to touch on briefly, it's a debate Jock and I have very regularly. If you get delegated authority, you represent Dumfries and Galloway Council on that board. You don't take direction from anybody else or instruction from anybody else. You make a judgment in the best interest of the council on the committee or board that you serve. And that's where Jock and I always differ.
Well, whatever the reasons for hopefully agreeing with what I'm saying, is that we come to the same conclusion here, is that there needs to be a route through for putting you first to be accountable, right, to a council committee in some way or other. If it's a delegated subcommittee, that's absolutely fine. And the minutes of that subcommittee will then reflect it and be the conduit for bringing it back here into full council. Okay, without rehashing the whole thing, you've got different views, but you've got the same outcome.
Well, no, I'm not arguing with you. I'm arguing with Jock, because Jock seems to have the opinion we take direction from the Social Work Committee and then present it, and that's not what you do when you get delegated authority.
Okay, just before we go any further, just for absolute clarity as well, I'm just looking at Judith and John here, the putting you first thing, which is a bit of a red herring in this process right at this moment in time, as far as budgets are concerned, is 100% controlled and looked after by the NHS. Am I right?
As Chief Executive and Accountable Officer of the NHS, the Chief Executive of NHS Dumfries and Galloway is accountable for the budget. for putting you first for the Change Fund, the National Change Fund.
Thank you. It was actually more the governance arrangements surrounding the staff, who are council staff in there, why it has to come back to us. Okay? And also it keeps us informed. Now, I did take governance advice. The wording I have is makes it a legitimate motion for the motion. I'm checking that. I'm correct, am I? Yes. So the words as are. Now, I'd like consensus if I can get it, but obviously if I don't, we'll go to a vote. I'm prepared to put it forward as a motion, or either as a recommendation, or not a recommendation, but it has to be a motion because we're requiring something to happen. So, in terms of the the recommendations we've considered at 2.1, we've done that. At 2.2, I'm suggesting that what I have here on the piece of paper then becomes the 2.2. Right? Can we get an agreement on that? Yep. Okay. Now the motion I'm prepared to put forward, and I could do with a seconder. Okay, Dennis, thank you. Is as on the piece of paper. And there's been some debate about that it requires, and I did specifically ask if that was competent, and apparently it is. So have we got consensus, or do we need to go to a vote? Consensus? Okay, thanks very much. Could you just tell us exactly what it is? Yeah.
Chairman, you've agreed 2.1 as set out in the report. 2.2 is amended to read the Joint Strategic Plan for Older People 2012 to 2022. An aligned joint strategic needs assessment must inform and influence the development of health and social care integration in Dumfries and Galloway. The plan must be reviewed to reflect the integration model still to be agreed by partners and any other relevant planning considerations within the lifetime of this plan. You've got a new 2.3 that this committee requires the Putting You First programme board, which comprises solely of officers, to improve its current governance arrangements of reporting solely to the NHS Dumfries and Galloway board and create a direct line of accountability and reporting in the first instance to Health and Social Care Partnership Board and through that board to the parent committees, i.e. NHS Dumfries and Galloway board and the Council's Social Work Services Committee.
Thank you. Move on to item 6. Sorry, Jane.
Might I just ask, it's not a part of the decision-making, but it was possibly as a file, an action note. We talked about a seminar. Members did seem to want that. I would like to ask whether or not that could be locality-specific. I think that's important that that goes out to all members.
Yes, points well made, and I was just coming to that, Jane. I've actually got down here, we did ask the STARS management team if they'd be prepared to do it on a district-by-district basis, which is probably the best way forward, and encourage every member to, if we do it through area committee, then most members will be there, so it's the biggest audience. I'd maybe suggest that we do the same with PYF. We go that way, and we can organise that through Judith. If you can take that back and try and get some sort of diary things organised between the STARS team and the PYF lead officer to come and answer questions so that members can find out what's happening in their area. Basically, I think it's a concern, isn't it? You know, they need to know. I think because people are asking them things you know, in the surgeries and things, and they can't answer. So they're a bit in the dark, as they say. Okay, so can we agree that? Yeah, we'll also seek that. Yep, thank you. You okay with that, Jane? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay, move on to item 6. And it's quite clear. It's the Association Directors of Social Work Conference, which I think is in Crieff again, John, isn't it? Would you like anything like to add to the report, John?
Nothing to add, Chair.
You agree the recommendations? Yep. Sorry, Jane, yep.
Can I ask something? I mean, let's be completely realistic about this. I think it's in Crieff, and I think it's actually not really totally reasonable to expect people to travel up and down. I think it's perfectly acceptable to say that if you require, whoever's going to go, and I don't know, I presume it will be you, Chairman, requires accommodation, that should be paid for. I think it's nonsense simply to exclude that. Because I actually agree with the Councillor McKee that we can all learn from each other, and I think it's quite important that that we take the opportunity when these are on to do it properly. But that does mean a report back. So I leave that there.
It's actually down to this committee to decide how many, if it's one member or more than one member. I think traditionally it's been the director with the chair. Jock will keep me right in the past. So I agree with that, yep. So I agree with that. I've got one other item of business which in actual fact is been circulated to you as well. It's this joint Joint Improvement Team Conference on the 14th of May, which is a free conference, and agrees to attendance of one member to attend as a day delegate. But there'll be an overnight stay, obviously, because it starts early on the morning. The conference itself is free, as you can see from that, and it's purely the overnight accommodation for one or more elected members. So again, I'm in your hands if you want one or more. Leader?
Chair, I've had an expression of interest from one person. I think you should go. I've had someone else who says they would wish to go, so I think it should be a maximum of maybe 5. Would that be inclusive for groups to attend on this? Because I think it's an important issue, joint commissioning going forward, and I think we need to have a good understanding of it, and if we can get.
Well, it's actually it's a different process. That's why it's not that thing. I think the Rangers are playing at the Lakeville Park in Dunblane that night, John, and you want to go?
I just think we should go with recommendations and bring a report back to this committee.
With one or more. Jane?
Again, if it's free, I think it's important that as many can go as possible. So you should jam as many as you can in one car. That's what you should do. Right. Well, if you don't have to stay overnight, however you do it, but let's maximise the opportunity.
Hey, without getting too personal, we're not going into a voting situation. It's like that programme with the turn our chairs and say, I'll have that one. No, we can't do that. But are we agreement to 2 or 3 up to a maximum of 3, for example, or that would allow? What? 1 or more? The share in the room has got me excited. Be careful, Marion.
Just at the stage of volunteering to go there. We ask members to travel for Stranraer every week, which is 100 mile to get here. There's no reason why they couldn't leave early in the morning and travel to Crieff if they wanted to. And we should pay accommodation for one plus the director or member of staff. The rest should go if they want, but at their own cost.
I'm trying to get consensus here without a vote. Ivor, are you wanting to a motion?
Chair, well, I think if there's somebody else wanting to go, you should allow them to go as well. So therefore, if I would move that we have up to a maximum of 3 members along with an officer.
Okay, can we get consensus up to a maximum of 3? Right, Joe, agreed. You're too late, Jim, for fighting. Okay, so it's up to a maximum of 3. Put your chair back in, Jim.
The motion is that we should agree to fund accommodation for the chair and a member of staff, and all other members who wish to go should be able to acquire a pool car and travel on the day. That's a motion.
Separate accommodation.
Separate accommodation.
Separate accommodation. Separate accommodation for the chair and the officer.
Thanks very much. Right, Ivor, so I'm assuming you've got an amendment.
I would say up to a maximum of 3 members.
And seconder? Dennis, thank you. We have a motion and we have an amendment.
Bit all over the place there, Chairman. Motion by Councillor Dempster, seconded by Councillor McKee, is to agree that attendance, including overnight accommodation for 1 member and a member of staff. The amendment by the leader, seconded by Councillor Mail, is to allocate 3 places. That includes accommodation. So the motion is 1 member plus member of staff paid for, and any other member who wishes to travel makes their
Can
own
you
way.
include that, please? That any other member, any other member, no member of staff, member or member of staff, it's members we're really dealing with here, should be able to secure the use of a pool car and travel on the day. It's not an unreasonable proposition, that.
And that doesn't include overnight accommodation.
And does not include overnight accommodation.
Is everyone quite clear then, before I proceed to the vote? Chairman, motion or amendment?
Amendment.
Vice Chairman?
Amendment.
Councillor Blake?
Amendment.
Councillor Brodie? Councillor Crothers?
Amendment.
Councillor Dempster? Councillor Dick? Councillor Yen?
Amendment.
Councillor Hislop? Councillor McCutcheon?
Motion.
Councillor McKee?
Motion.
Councillor Maitland?
Motion.
Councillor Mail?
Amendment.
Councillor Martin?
Motion.
Councillor Scobie is left. Councillor Stitt? Councillor Tate?
Amendment.
Councillor Wood?
Can you ensure, Chair, that we get a report back or a presentation from these members as well, and that we get a list of who the members attended actually were? I don't think that would be an unreasonable request.
Chairman, we have 6 votes for the motion, 11 for the amendment. The amendment is carried.
Okay. No, it's okay. That comes as a matter of course anyway, because the ADSW, when the director normally does a report back, a joint report for us both, and I'll ensure whoever is or are the attendees, a full report comes back to here. Okay, just before we finish, just I'd like to say that this is actually John's last committee meeting. I'd like to thank him on behalf of us for his work today and wish him well in his retirement. Okay, thank you.